Hej och välkommen till Techrekpodden. Det här är en podd som handlar om allt som har med techrekrytering att göra och en hel del om att bygga teknikorganisationer och talent acquisition-organisationer såklart. Och idag har vi ett avsnitt som verkligen handlar om vår smala nisch och det är Carima El Houri som är Head of Talent Acquisition på Tobii Dynavox. Ett sådant här bolag som ni borde ha koll på det här laget, men Carima har också gjort massa andra grejer innan som verkligen kan dela kloka erfarenheter hur man får till det här med TA-funktion som är ju det här handlar om. Så att varsågoda Carima och ni andra, hoppas att ni har njöt av midsommarafton. Eller sen ni andra, ni lyssnade snarare, jag hoppas att ni njöt av en bra midsommarafton och att ni laddar inför, ni kanske har några veckor kvar innan semestern. Developers. So, Carima, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
How does this feel?
It feels good. I'm excited to talk a little bit more with you today about, the various topics that we discussed and tell you a little bit more about my background as well. So,
No, so I have a warm-up question, which
okay.
What's top of mind at the moment? What are you thinking about?
Ooh, good question. Well, I guess top of mind is especially since I am heading out on maternity leave in about 2 months. A lot of my brain is like 50% baby prep and then 50%, how do I really set up my team to win? But honestly, I feel like I'm leaving with a lot of confidence. We actually found my replacement, JP, who I actually used to work with back in the day at Avalanche Studios. He's been a consultant for a while, so he's going to be joining, or he already joined us actually as my maternity cover.
I think we should do a special shout out, JP, because a lot of the listeners have worked with him. So
great.
He's
that's good. That's good.
We are definitely a top talent acquisition person. So
yes.
I think you made a good choice there.
Great. Exactly. No, I think it's going to be really good. We also have some time now to kind of hand over, and also I feel like we've built a good team at Tobii Dynavox as well. They're self-sufficient and self-driving as well, with really a mix of different backgrounds and perspectives and abilities. So
give us a little bit into what kind of company, maybe what are you doing at the moment, and then we can sort of look at the actual sort of
absolutely
nitty-gritty of how you get it to work.
Absolutely. So at Tobii Dynavox, we actually build assistive tech that gives people a voice. So we're talking about AAC. And that's augmentative and alternative communication tools like eye tracking devices for people with ALS and touch devices as well. But with people primarily with ALS, CP or cerebral palsy and autism. And of course, we also support other disabilities as well. But to really put it into perspective, there's around 50 million people globally that can't speak. And there's around 2 million more that are diagnosed each year, but only 2% really get the support that they need. So get some kind of, either a device or whatever it might be to really help them to be able to communicate. And that's what we're looking at, is really closing that gap. And I would say that, of course, coming from gaming, I know what it's like to build products that people really love and are kind of there for entertainment. And I would say for us now at Tobii Dynavox, we build products that people really need. And that really hits different. So we don't really do all the bells and whistles. It's more impact, I would say.
And you at the moment, I know you're in a transition to Tobii Dynavox. What are you you're recruiting a lot at the moment? Can you sort of give a little bit of background of that so people understand?
Absolutely. So right now, actually, I would say our two main, or maybe the three biggest teams that we're recruiting for right now is the product and development hub. So in Stockholm, we're now growing a new dev hub with about 60 hires this year. And we're actually almost halfway through with about 35 hires since we started in the beginning of the year. And actually 48% are women. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
That's very impressive.
Highlight.
You must
highlight that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's very impressive, actually.
So that's really cool, actually. Yes.
And why Stockholm? Why is that sort of why is that happening?
So for us, the reason why is because before the dev or the P&D team was split between Stockholm and Pittsburgh. And so we decided, to basically just keep up with scale, because that's one of the things we're focusing on is growth and scale and technology. We said it makes more sense for us to have a centralized hub here in Stockholm where we can really work together as a team. one location. So that's the main reason why we've now decided to have the new dev hub here and hire a lot of people.
Yeah. Should we say something about, just because people get you mixed up with Tobii,
yes, absolutely.
Let's remind everybody what that is.
Absolutely. Yes, so that's true. People do mix us up with Tobii, and there is a reason for that. We used to be part of Tobii. So Tobii actually bought Dynavox a few years ago. And Dynavox is a company that originated in the US, primarily focusing on AAC. And then Tobii is the company that developed the eye tracking and the eye gaze technology. But then in 2021, we decided, because, like I mentioned, the underserved market, we really wanted to focus on really honing in on that and really bridging that gap. So that's why we decided to separate from Tobii and become independent in 2021, I believe. So now we are no longer part of Tobii. Our name externally, we do still use Tobii Dynavox more for brand recognition, but actually we're registered as a Dynavox Group. And we've also done a lot of M&As since then as well, to both acquire some of our resellers, but also to acquire companies like, for example, Acapella in France and Belgium. They work on synthetic voices, so specifically for people with ALS, where they lose their voice over time, and now we can capture that person's voice so that the device sounds more like them, which is really appreciated by them, but also by family members too.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yes, so that's really cool. And then we also have Readapt in Germany, and they build all of our mounts and our stands that we can attach to the devices to make them more accessible as well.
But you sort of read up about, you sort of start looking, you realize Salzburg, Barcelona, California, gaming. How did you end up? How did you end up in Sweden?
Good question.
Actually, talent acquisition.
Yes. So actually, my mother is Swedish. She's actually half Swedish, half Austrian, but born here in Stockholm. So that's kind of where I have the connection to Sweden.
So that means Sweden has always been sort of a part of your life in that sense, or
in a sense, I would say so. Yes, yeah, it's been like a third home, maybe, in a way. So yeah, it's always been a part. It's now always been on the map, if you will, of places to go. But I guess I could start. I actually have a twin sister. We were born in Germany. And then moved to Florida, actually, when we were kids, and grew up there, lived there until I was about 15 years old. Wow. And then from there moved to Austria, went to a American boarding school. And like I said, part of my family is from Austria as well. So we have some family there.
So on your own, or was it with the family?
With my sister, with my twin sister, and also our mom as well. Yes.
Yeah. And as you did an IB course. I went to boarding school, did IB as well. That was
Oh, you did? I like boarding school. I mean, when you were there, it was kind of like, oh, this is horrible. But now looking back, there's like nice memories. And I feel like people that I meet that have gone to boarding school, they have like that same shared sense of appreciation for it, actually.
I agree that for me, it was really good for me. And the IB program was perfect for me.
Yes.
I really that was, I think, looking back, I really flourished, I think.
Yes, I agree.
And especially, I mean, just being able to focus. And I don't think I never was as good as I was when I finished IB.
No, exactly. Same. I think it sets up like a good foundation, I think.
Yeah, it does, definitely.
It really does. To like even just like take responsibility and like the whole like skill building part, I think.
It's funny. I noticed you did almost the same subject. I did English and physics. And what was your extended essay about? What was your subject?
So mine was actually what was that? History, actually. I always liked history. Yes.
But how did you go then? What happened after that?
Yeah. So after high school in Austria, then I moved to Barcelona, actually. And I studied there. Actually, PR and communications was my major. So that's.
And was that an obvious choice to go? I mean, why Barcelona and why?
I mean, to be honest, my uncle actually was living in Barcelona, and I wanted to go somewhere away from home, just to kind of. Actually, it was my sister and I, so it wasn't just me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of the reason for it. I had been to Barcelona many times, and then I knew of the school. I really wanted to study PR as well, and this was like a business-focused university, so they had PR as one of the majors. So that was the reason. And then there was a few friends that were going, and it was a fun city, of course. So that was part of the choice too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when did you start sort of realizing you wanted to, what was the sort of next step for you?
So then I ended up, when did I graduate? That was like 2011. So it was a really tough time to be in Spain and look for a job, actually.
That was
yes.
And suddenly Barcelona they've had a tough few years, hadn't they? There?
Yes, exactly. So there was a lot of, people losing unemployment, people losing jobs.
Because their sort of, their Lehman crisis was like super, it also was a massive, what's the word? Building. I mean, all their construction was crushed, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes, correct. So it was around that time. So it was a bit tough to find something. Yeah. And my Spanish was good, but not maybe, perfect in the sense that I could look for a job that only, where I could only speak Spanish. So I was looking for, a role where I could speak in English or an international company, and it was very hard to find. And then that's actually when I got into recruitment. So I started working for a recruitment agency. It was a small agency that focused working with companies in the US and in the UK, like GlaxoSmithKline and Procter & Gamble. So I started there actually for a few months. And then from there, I moved to another company called Xerox, but I was more than on the HR side as like first line support for HR questions. So that was kind of my first two roles there in Barcelona, and how I got into recruitment and HR.
And then suddenly Sweden happened.
Yes, exactly. Then I decided to move. I just felt like, okay, why not take that step? I didn't feel like I found anything really, concrete in Barcelona. And I feel like, okay, I had a fun time studying there, but now it's maybe time to move on. So that's when I decided then to move to Stockholm. So I actually moved to Malmö first, where I was working for my stepdad's company. He works with, or his company at the time, they were producing cosmetics for high-end brands and for brands like H&M and Gina Tricot and stuff like that. So I was working almost like a buyer, or to look at how do we make sure that we're developing the right products for our customers. So that was my first, I think, year in Sweden, in Malmö. And then I moved to, then I applied for new roles, because that was just more of a stepping stone. He was helping us out. Just to get on our feet kind of thing. And that's then when I started looking for jobs, both actually in Copenhagen and in Stockholm. And then I got the job at Klarna, working initially with the customer service, German-speaking market.
Oh, that was a good fit for you then.
Yeah. Yes, so that was good. And I learned a lot as well. But of course, I didn't want to do that forever. So I had then spoken to the HR manager at the time there and said that I was interested in getting back into HR. And that's where I really wanted to grow my skill set. So then they gave me an opportunity to first, I had like a 6-month assignment. And then from there 3-month assignment. And then from there, I continued into the HR track. But that was also not recruitment. That was more HR admin. So I was working as an HR generalist, supporting the HR business partners with like the employee survey.
And how did you realize that recruitment was your forte? How did that happen?
I think I saw felt that there was like a direct connection with PR, which is, kind of more that outward facing, like how do we attract people? How do we create a sense of storytelling? How do we, interact with people really more from a, external perspective rather than an internal perspective. So that's why I felt recruitment was more what I wanted to get into. And then unfortunately I didn't get that opportunity at Klarna. So that's when then I actually got headhunted, funnily enough, to King. And at that time, everyone knew Candy Crush, but no one knew King. So when they called me, I thought King, the fashion magazine or like the men's magazine. That was my initial thought, that I was interviewing for them. But turns out it was actually Candy Crush.
And that was also your introduction to gaming, because you since then spent, can you sort of, just give a few sort of dive downs of your talent acquisition years, sort of what have been the sort of big learnings of working at? Because you've been at King, at LiveSub, at StarStep, at Avalanche. You've been enrolled. I mean,
yes.
Give a little bit of a.
Yeah, I've been in a variety of different roles, and also, mainly TA, of course, and both in really big teams, but also in smaller teams as well, and really like starting and building the TA team from the ground up, if you want to say so. So I would say having navigated both the tech and game industries, I would say I've learned that also when we're just looking at people and hiring people, that talent isn't just about scale. It's really about adaptability, curiosity. How do we kind of align with our values? And I think great hires aren't just found. It's really about how they're shaped through intentional culture and clarity and conversation. So I think the best teams, they think more like product managers and more like strategists rather than just filling roles, really looking at how can they support the business.
Explain that a little bit more concretely. What do you mean by that?
How would I say that? I would say for me, it's really about understanding what the business needs, having the big picture. So not just thinking about, okay, I'm going to wait now for someone to give me a role and then fill it and then give them the short list and screen candidates. I think it's really about understanding like the culture. What are we offering? What is the business need? Where are we headed? And how can I also support the hiring managers and the hiring teams in the right direction? And also for them to understand what the market looks like today. So I think that's what I think is where I've seen the best TA teams.
I mean, that's to a certain extent, that's what everybody would say, yes. But it's quite a challenge to get that to work. What are your sort of learnings? How do you sort of, how do you do that? I mean, how do you do it in
That's a good question. I would say for me, it is kind of going back or going to one of the topics that we were going to discuss today, kind of having the agile talent acquisition. So not just refining our hiring process, but more about rethinking our mindset. And that's where I think agility is kind of the key word. So for me, I would say it's, steal a few pages from the product teams, I would say. So, launch rough, learn fast, learn how to kill your darlings, and really look at like ship, reflect, improve. So always kind of improving the process as you go. And I think for us, we've really been doing that by like having more weekly retrospectives, looking at what's working, what's not working, also identifying tasks versus projects, because a lot of the times you get overwhelmed with a lot of things that you want to complete, especially when you're also in the middle of hiring a lot of people, which takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and effort. So how do we kind of identify that as well? So we've done exercises like that actually to look at how can we identify tasks versus projects together with one of our
And you give an example. What do you mean by that? Sort of from a team?
Yeah. So for example, with a project, it would be more somewhere where you say, okay, we need buy-in from the business. We probably need to then also have, we need to involve other stakeholders. Maybe it's marketing, maybe it's, IT or whatever, HR business partners, where a task is more like something that we just need to get done. Like, for example, update our job description templates, for example, or make sure that we have the right rejection emails, things like that take up time and you kind of put on to the side. So you're like, oh, I'll take that later. So how do we kind of like prioritize those and how do we identify tasks versus projects?
And can you be sort of, what sort of tools, how do you sort of get it to work in practice? You say and really be concrete that you have weekly sync. I mean, how do you sort of, how does that work?
So we actually have someone on our team, Jesse. He's just relocated from Pittsburgh. So he's been with the company at Tobii Dynavox for a while. And he's now also, he's a senior recruiter, but also working with more operational excellence as well. So he's kind of like our project manager, if you want to say so, within TA. So I think that's one way of doing it. Maybe identifying someone on the team that is almost like that project manager or that agile coach or scrum master or whatever it might be. So he's been helping us a lot with identifying these different project areas. And then also how do we delegate that then to various people on the team?
Back to then TA. So this is quite a big project, and I mean, even though I know the years before the current crisis, there were lots of projects like this, but it's quite an unusual project. I mean, there aren't that many big recruitment projects like this at the moment. So
no,
what have you how do you do it? And perhaps what are the sort of big learnings perhaps you brought with you from other experiences previously?
Well, that's a good question as well. I mean, I would say one of our big learnings is, actually, I can start maybe by saying that when I joined Tobii Dynavox, that was in August last year. This was like we were just at the start of rolling this out. we hadn't gone live yet, but we had a core team internally that we were discussing, the next steps. So I was really kind of thrown into this as like the first project on my to-do list. So I think for me, the learnings were definitely like really understanding what the organization is going to look like. So I think that's where we saw a lot of unclarity for especially the TA team, because we weren't really sure, okay, what roles are coming up next, which roles will be the priority first, how can we make sure that we start building up those pipelines so that we can, align ourselves to support the business in the best way. So that's, I think, is one thing that was a learning, to do that quite early on, to bring in the TA team early on, really understand what the organization will look like and what roles will be the priority, so that we can start those types of, we can start pipelining, because that was one thing that set us back a bit actually with the hiring, was that we didn't have alignment there.
I mean, that's also sometimes easy to say, because a company like you guys tends to people, you maybe not quite, especially when you're building an organization, you might not exactly know what it's going to look like. There might be some
exactly,
changes.
And that's part of it. Absolutely. And that is part of it as well. That I think that we were also going through the growing pains and figuring it out along the way. But that did lead to some frustrations for the TA team, of course.
And how do you sort of handle that going forward? That's interesting. I know it's almost the sort of what always happens.
Yes.
but especially with bigger projects, how do you handle that sort of change in scope all the time?
Well, I would say for us, it is really about communication. I would say that's key for us, and transparency as well. So I think that's been great in our case, that we've been able to speak directly to Marcus, who you, I think, had on the podcast.
Yeah, he wasn't. Yeah, this is actually very unusual to have two, but I think also you represent so different parts of the. So it's a good combo actually.
Yes. So he's been, it's been great. Like we've been, able to speak to him and pull him aside whenever needed, and really also partner with HR as well, with people operations. My colleague Luis, who's been leading the project from the HR operations side. So it's been, I think that's the most important thing, is that we have that time and that space to really communicate and be able to
really
align.
Like a structure,
structure,
and basically a meeting structure to sort of make sure you do it sort of. What about illustration? Have you used any? I realize this is sort of detailed questions, but I know the listeners will want this. Like, what is sort of? I mean, how do you sort of show or talk about? Do you have do you use like Trello or?
Yes, we use Trello. So that was actually the first time where, for me personally, I'm a very visual person. So I like seeing things, in boxes and in color codes and all of that. So that was actually something that we did do, is that we mapped it out, what the new organization, because we have different areas. And that's then where we then could see, okay, what roles do we have people in today? What roles need to be backfilled? Which roles are going to be new roles? So that we used Miro for, which was great for visualizing. And then we also have Workday as well. So that's something that Luis and Marcus have been working on, to really add all of the job positions in Workday, so we have a clear sense of the organization and the structure and who's reporting into who. I will say Workday is a little bit harder for us to work in as a TA team. It's not as intuitive. So we also have the classic Excel sheet that we use, we have weekly syncs, both just as the P&D hiring team, but also every Friday we meet with the stakeholders. So with Marcus, with the hiring managers, Luis from HR operations, to align on like, where are we today? What are the bottlenecks?
And how you how do you then translate that to how big your team should be, or how do you do that sort of planning? I mean, do you sort of know, or because that can, of course, it's difficult to know when you start like that. What time is it going to take? How much resources do we need? Yeah,
exactly. So that's what we did as well. So we did a bit of like a forecast to see, okay, how many roles do we have? We also looked at historically, how long do we know it takes to fill a role? What's our time to fill? And also, and how many roles what's the bandwidth and the capacity of each recruiter, and how many people do we have on the team today? So actually, the team of FTEs, or in-house recruiters, there were 6 today, 3 in Pittsburgh and 3 here in Stockholm. But then we also have, because of the product and development hiring, we've also brought on 3 consultants, one of which is Maya, who's from ants to join us. So we're now 4 people totally dedicated just to hiring for P&D.
And then let's go. What about in one of the projects we would talk about was sort of the purpose-driven. I mean, and of course, that's really important. How do you sort of have you tapped that? How is this important in a project like this? Tell me.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think it is important. I mean, purpose-driven, I think it's aligned with our company in general, not just hiring for P&D. I would say purpose is we're a purpose-driven company overall. Even if you look at, for example, our funding team. So in the US, our biggest teams are actually our solutions consultants and the funding team. They're really like our frontline heroes, supporting families, the therapists, our providers. And then, of course, all the other roles. I think we all have that in common, that we're doing this with a purpose. I think for us, we're not just trying to like say that we're doing it. We really try to make sure that we're not just walking the talk on inclusion, if you want to say so. So now we're also piloting a new ways to engage talent with disabilities, for example. So we're now in the process of putting together a project team and looking at reviewing basically all of our hiring processes, how we communicate, and what accessibility really means to us.
That's very interesting. Can we talk a little bit about that? It's a really interesting subject, and how and also new law coming, or as just in June, I think, in Sweden. How do you do sort of can you explain that a little bit more in practice? How does it
with hiring people with neurodiversity and disabilities? Yeah. I mean, right now I would say it's still early days. I don't have that many details to share, but we've put together, because we've already have a diversity group that have been working more like on initiatives, both from every diversity from every sense of the world, not just, disability or neurodiversity. And then from there, we said, okay, it would be great for us to also, since what we do is helping people with disabilities to have a voice, we also want to make sure that then how are we providing that same kind of service, for people who are also in that situation, but looking for jobs. We should be leaders in hiring people with disabilities. So
and I mean, in your case, it could definitely be seen as a skill to have this experience, because I mean, you would definitely it would be sort of a added bonus if you know how.
Exactly.
I'm sure you understand the user a lot more if you had the same experience yourself.
Yes, exactly. So that's why. So that's why now we're looking at reviewing everything, like the hiring processes and everything, to see how can we make sure that it is more accessible, but also looking at our teams internally. So speaking to hiring managers, like what roles do we have that could, maybe in some cases it might not make sense for someone with a disability to, have a role like that. But it's, if it's tech support, for example, or HR or marketing, why not identify roles where we see, we could actually hire people with a disability or with neurodiversity, depending on, what that looks like. So that's one way of doing it as well, that we've been now starting to identify that together with hiring managers.
And is there anything, have you any thoughts about the hiring process? I mean, the recruitment process, how do you sort of make sure it's inclusive in that sense? Have you sort of any sort of details you think I mean, I realize it's not, I spent a lot of time thinking about it. I haven't sort of seen a solve all or anything, but it's, it's definitely interesting how what you can and cannot do.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, from our sense now, what we've been focusing on more is kind of looking at like what we offer as an employee. So how we live our purpose, I would say. We haven't really gotten into the nitty gritty of like the, compliance pieces of it, I would say. But more just looking at like, what do we want to achieve? What's our vision? What's our goal? And then from there, now we're taking those steps to really understand what is it that we can do and all of that. But I would say for us, it's also looking at our EVP that we've been working on as well, which is all about purposeful choices.
Can you explain that a little bit? When you say you've been working on it, what have you?
Yes. So this is work that's been started actually before I joined, and now we've rolled it out somewhat internally. So we've been discussing it between marketing and HR or people in sustainability, and now we're looking into how can we incorporate it into more of our processes as well. So for us, it's really about creating that kind of identity and that DNA for ourselves as well. So that's why we chose purposeful choices.
Yeah. Can you explain the nitty-gritty of that, in the sense that, and I'm really interested in how you, because I realize that you talk about it internally, you do it, but how does that work, and how do you sort of, the challenge is always, how do you translate that to something that actually means something?
Yes.
How do you get it to sort of work? Everybody can make great PowerPoints and
of
whatever,
course,
but it's sort of, how does that, how have you done that?
Well, we've actually launched TD Pathfinders. So the Pathfinders are kind of looking at how do we identify what's important to certain individuals, because everyone's not the same. Even if like, both candidates are looking to both work at Tobii Dynavox, it could be for totally entirely different reasons, and might be motivated by different reasons as well. So that's where we then incorporated the TD Pathfinders. So there we have caring clinicians, techies with heart, sustainable specialists, and compassionate communicators. Those are our four.
So they're like personas who have...
Personas, exactly.
Okay. And that you're open with internally, but also you're thinking you'll be open with them externally.
We're going to start doing more work with them externally as well. So now we're actually looking at incorporating them into our, job ads. So depending on which role, so for example, if we're hiring someone in product and development, then we'll use the techies with heart job description template, for example, and job ad.
And how does that help you from recruitment?
So I think for us, it's looking at how do we communicate with the candidates. So how are we aligning with what motivates them, with what's important to them. So we've identified in each persona, what is it that's important to them, what motivates them, what gets them going, if you want to say, what are their pain points. And that's then we incorporate that into the actual job ad, so that when someone's applying for a job, they feel like, okay, wow, this actually resonates with me.
So really an internal work to see what sort of things do it resound in the company. Okay, I identify with this, what makes you tick, and then you can then use that to communicate externally. Okay, this is what typically works for this quote unquote kind of persona.
Exactly.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yes. So that's one way that we've been working with it as well. Mm-hmm.
And what about the sort of marketing side of a campaign like this? What have you sort of felt? What have you done? And perhaps what do you feel works?
So we've been doing a lot of work with marketing, which has been great. I have to say, there's been a lot of engagement from marketing as well to really work on employer branding. So right now we're looking into both launching a new career page. Right now, the career page is tied to Workday, so it's kind of just a list of roles, which works. I mean, people can go in and apply, and they can still see our YouTube and our LinkedIn and all of that. But we really want to rebuild or revamp basically our career page. And that's then going to include more like employee testimonials, videos. Marketing's now also together with us. We put together employer branding video as well that we're going to go live with shortly. And then also now we've got the LinkedIn Enterprise. So we're going to have a live page as well, where we're going to build out a little bit more around talking about our culture and employer branding. So that's what we've been doing so far. So I would say it's still early days.
Yeah. And what are those things do you feel you have most, this is really going to work, or what do you feel most, has most potential of those things that you do?
Good question. I would say it's more about like the content that we put on LinkedIn and how we because that's where we see most of the engagement and interaction as well. So really kind of understanding like who we are as an employer. And I think, and really, being true to that, because that's the thing. I think often you see companies, and we're probably guilty of that ourselves, having kind of the standard, like, come and work for us, we're hiring, and then it's kind of a friendly looking person smiling with a little, and I think that's nice, but I think that we've seen that, many times before. So I think it's more about really like digging deep and showing like what our secret sauce really is. Like, who are we?
How do you do that? How do you get that to work? How do you sort of?
Well, I think actually one thing that's nice is that we do have a lot of people that come to the office. So we have like a company band. They have like jam sessions, actually Marcus is part of that too. So it's fun. So, so they just get together, and we actually, when we just opened up the new office space in Stockholm as well. So they had a performance and things like that make it us a little bit more, true to who we actually are.
And so let's just move on a little bit.
Yes,
or maybe before we sort of, let's just, I asked you in the beginning, what was sort of some of the lessons have been over this 6 months? You started talking about workforce planning and other things that you say, okay, we should have done this differently, or this would, having redone it, I would have done it this way. Is there anything else you sort of?
I think it's important to sometimes just you're always like in a rush to get things done and like overly ambitious and, everything needs to be kind of perfect. And I guess that's actually one of our team mottos now is progress rather than perfection. So I think that's kind of like that, having that mindset, this agile mindset, that it's not, we don't need to get things done quickly. It's better to take the time to really understand it a little bit in the beginning, at least, and then have that kind of constant learning and then you can start to speed things up, obviously. But in the beginning, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be in a rush to do things. I think that's kind of one of my learnings, because you feel like there's so much thrown at you, so you want to do good at everything kind of thing. So
you sort of basically choose, which also causes an agile principle to make sure
yes.
you don't do everything at the same time, sort of force yourself to make, and perhaps also make the managers also decide what you can't either give us more resources or you have to choose.
Exactly.
That's sort of quite a typical discussion that I think we quite often need to be taken.
Absolutely.
And of course, we can't avoid the AI subject. It doesn't necessarily be AI, but what are you feeling? I mean, having been all through these years of talent acquisition in a period where talent acquisition really, and we haven't delved into your gaming experience, but I mean, you've definitely been in a period where went from being something peripheral that, was sort of something that HR sometimes did, and recruiters, companies sometimes use recruiters, to becoming like a really central function in companies. I mean, what's your sort of feeling now? What's the sort of forefront of talent acquisition at the moment? Where do you feel that the big leaps are going to be taken in the coming years, and how is all this around us going to affect us? I realize that's a massive question, 3 massive questions.
Yeah.
But I really just want to hear you.
And it's always tricky with AI, to be honest. But I think, I would say here's my take is that like this is not just in TA. I think this goes for actually every profession in a sense. But being a professional today isn't really like being a baker in the Industrial Revolution. Those skills lasted a lifetime. You could use the same skills and even hand them over to your, their next generation. And now I think what we see is that the work that we're doing today is maybe even going to be irrelevant next year. So we constantly have to be upskilling and reskilling. So I think for me, I think we're not really at that stage right now, at least, where AI is going to replace recruiters, but I think it will start replacing recruiters that are not using AI versus recruiters that are using AI. So I think you just have to jump on the bandwagon and really, start.
What do you think of if you look at a recruitment, on all the things you've been doing over the last year, where do you think are the sort of the low-hanging fruits at the moment? What are you guys sort of looking at where you think this is where we should move first?
So for us, I would say, of course, it's a lot around like sourcing, so AI sourcing.
And what are you doing there? What works there, you find?
So that's the thing. We don't have it, unfortunately, built into Workday because there we don't have that functionality to filter. But it's more what we're doing is when we're looking at candidates, we can now kind of filter faster when we, if we put them into like more of like a sourcing sheet, we can see, okay, what are the kind of key points that we're looking for? What are the key skill sets that we're looking for as well? That's
are you using any tools there, or you've just built your own GPTs?
Yeah, exactly. And then also, of course, I think one thing that we can do, that we want to do as well is, of course, the, better candidate experience. I think that their AI will obviously do a lot, in terms of like getting, following up quicker, automated scheduling, all of those things I think are definitely low-hanging fruit that TA should be using for a better candidate experience. All of the admin stuff, email templates, all of that. But I think the place where we still need that human, touch is that kind of the empathy part, the human part, because yeah, sure, you might ask AI to like source a bunch of candidates and then filter out the top 3, based on the criteria that you're looking for. But then when you actually speak to those, you don't choose the person maybe necessarily that has the best success rate in the role that they're doing, but more maybe from a cultural perspective or a personal story that they've shared. Like for us, for example, since we are so purpose driven, a lot of people that work with us maybe have like a personal connection, to someone with a disability or something, and you can see it's something that's very close to their heart. So of course that shines through more than someone that's a bit indifferent, So I think things like that is hard to assess with AI right now, the empathy part. But I think who knows where we'll be in a few years from now. It's a little bit scary, of course.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, and do you feel that if you're looking forward, and perhaps from your sort of own perspective, but also from the people around you, what do you think? How do you think the skill of a recruiter will change, or how will you sort of? I mean, will it be? Is that going to change? Is that going to be different, or what's your sort of take?
I think it is going to change. Like I said, I think you have to be able to like constantly be kind of stay relevant as well. So because now our skills expire faster. So what lasts, in my opinion, is like the curiosity part, the adaptability, pattern recognition, even, things like that, I think what those are the skill sets maybe that are going to last a little bit more with a recruiter. And I think also not just being like stuck on, being a recruiter and filling roles, but also seeing how can you diversify a little bit, working with, for example, D&I, or with, employer branding, or, data analytics, or whatever it might be. Like have another skill set attached to you besides just filling roles. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think that's a way to stay a bit more adaptable as well.
I need to pitch you something, Carima.
Yes, okay.
I'm thinking about. Of course, I spend a lot of time thinking about the same issue. How will sort of ants stay relevant? And one of the things that we're looking at the moment is of course the agents. And for me, the sort of AI agents is suddenly the first time I think at least I sort of see a proper path forward that might work from a commercial sense as well. Yeah. And give me some feedback here if you think I'm right or wrong. So what I'm thinking is that quite soon, rather than selling. Of course, we try and sell the brand ads, we do so and so and so, but quite often it's still an individual, like you meet Maya or somebody else that brings all this. And I'm thinking perhaps the next way to be able to sort of kind of heighten what we as a company could do is that you say, okay, what we do is that we, with each recruiter, you get a sort of team of AI agents or recruiting AI agents that do quite specific skills.
Exactly.
And then you sort of said, this is that we've which is true as well. We've learned this and this. We've trained them on our data, and they're also really good at sporting Maya because they know Maya, and these are Maya's ants AI agents. How do you feel about that?
That's actually interesting. Yeah, I like that actually. Yeah. No, but I think that actually does make sense. Yeah, that could work for sure.
I sort of the feeling when you want to sort of move from. Yes, we're good, but we use AI. Everybody else, you would say yes, but we have something else that's specific for us that we bring with you, and you will notice that this is every time we start recruitment, it will be twice as fast. It will do this and this and this.
Exactly. Yes,
you can sort of translate that to value. Is that you think that's a good? Is that a way to package it?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
What are your no's? what would be your follow-up questions if I was trying to sell you this?
Oh God, good question. I would say maybe I would say like, how do we make sure that we're constantly staying relevant? I think that's the tricky. It's the speed for me that's a little bit hard to keep up with things.
I think one of course subject we haven't touched on, which is interesting. I just thought of it now that you mentioned it. Of course, is this? I mean, it's been an interesting time to have operations in Sweden and the US with the politics. How is that? How is that all? I mean, how is this sort of the glow? I mean, of course, from all the whole inclusivity and diversity, that part, but also
that's also
general worry about how's that? How have you seen that has affected this project?
I mean, not necessarily the project, I would say. Not really, no. I would say we haven't felt it too much with like hiring within Sweden. But I think for us, it hasn't been too much of an effect when we're hiring specifically for people within, any industry or any, position in in Stockholm. We have also been hiring, most of the people that we hire are actually also Stockholm or Swedish based. We don't do that much relocation. We've just started now a bit more with like starting to relocate.
Yeah. And why is that? Because there are certain roles you have
yes,
training?
Exactly. But for the most part, most people that we've hired are actually.
That's interesting. What do you see as sort of at the moment is difficult, easy on the Swedish market? What are you seeing from? I mean, having doing so many roles, what are your sort of what's your feeling? What's difficult? What's easy at the moment?
I would say probably what's easy is the sense that, unfortunately, with all the layoffs, of course, there's been a lot more people looking for roles. So I think that's been one thing that's kind of made it a little bit easier in a way, that we actually get a lot of applications. So even without the employer branding efforts, a lot of the times I noticed that when I do open up a role, we get a lot of good, candidates that we either hire or interview at least. So I would say that's been one thing. I think, trying to think what the hard part would be. And also, I mean, like I said, people want to join us because we have a good culture. We have the purpose-driven side as well, so people feel like, okay, a lot of people think, okay, I've been doing this now for a while. I've been doing a certain industry for a while, and that's been fun, but now I really want to shift and do something that feels like I'm making an impact. And I think that's where you see a lot of people then apply as well.
I think that's true. I mean, we see that as well. Definitely in health. Yes. Health tech is sort of trending up, and I think to a certain extent, people of a certain age, having maybe been in other industries, you suddenly feel, maybe it's time to do something a little bit more impactful. And that's definitely if you can combine that with sort of job security, I think you're definitely in a good position.
Exactly.
I think,
yes, and the job security too. I mean, we're growing, so of course people feel that, okay, that's obviously something now with all the layoffs that we've seen the last few years. Of course, it's nice to see, a company that's actually growing as well.
But when you say hard, I mean, that you said you're doing some sort of relocations. I mean, is that because some of those roles are hard, or is it just that you've sort of found?
Either it's been hard to fill, or that we found individuals that we felt like, okay, this is
worth relocating.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm.
And what, just from a hard perspective, it's always interesting. Is there any sort of roles or types that you find particularly difficult at the moment, or is it just there's no sort of trend there?
I would say software engineers. That's always a difficult one, but I think it's always harder, especially when you're sourcing.
I'm glad to hear that. Yes. This is not going away.
No, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's still the toughest one.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of still just give you sort of share what we're seeing at the moment is that we're, of course, compared to where we came from, it has been easier to recruit software engineers, but it's definitely a lot easier. But it's still hard. And of course, what happens is in the current climate that everybody, because they can, you sort of move the bar higher. You say we have the ability to hire somebody more senior now. Let's try and do it because we couldn't do that before, and then. So, and of course, to a certain extent, the roles that end up with us are the ones that are difficult to recruit. So there aren't that many junior roles recruiting at the moment. Whereas having 2 years back, we did a lot of junior roles because that was also difficult. So now the sort of 5-year pluses tend to be, and of course, we see a lot of cybersecurity, a lot of sort of architect roles, a lot of data roles, whatever you mean by that, but sort of data scientists, data engineering, architect roles around that. Those are the ones that we sort of see trending. And then also and that probably also affects you also on the electronic side. We also see a lot of movement there, and as in sort of bigger industries like people are building factories, exactly. Medtech. There are actually, that's happening now, and there is more production being done in Sweden than there was before. And then suddenly you have sort of electrical engineers, and then you have the sort of embedded people, and that's also sort of trending up in a way that hasn't really been there before. Even though, of course, there are Northvolt and other cases which aren't doing so well, there is still seen to be a big underlying need for that, and whether it's driven by just general global trends of where you produce things, or whether it's to do with the regionalization and tariffs, maybe a little bit of both, but it's definitely happening in an extent that we haven't actually seen before. So that's interesting. Final question about AI, and it's from a sort of recruitment point of view, not from a recruiter point of view, but from the people you need. Has sort of the development of AI, or has that changed your view on the sort of skill set you want, or is it? I mean, see what I mean? is it just have to be fast, or is it just we do actually think that there are certain it will change in a certain way?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think I mean, I wouldn't say that we've identified specific skill sets, but yeah, absolutely. I think for some roles, the need for AI is definitely, going to become larger, or we're already looking at that now, I would say.
And have you seen? Is there anything you show? I realize it's difficult. You don't know, but is there anything you sort of see that okay, this is what we think this is going, or what we think this will mean?
Well, I think it's going to be a lot more like I said, for example, if you look at what we're doing with a cappella and the synthetic voices, for example, like things like that, where we're developing more from a product perspective, I would say. How can we enhance and improve our products with the use of AI? And then actually we had a funny, I don't know if it's funny or not, but actually we had, I don't know if you saw it on our LinkedIn, but we had a AI twin of our CEO, Frederick.
So I did see that. Yes, I did see that.
Into the AI, strategy.
Has that worked? Has he? What's he used it for?
I don't. That's the thing. He did he gave us like a mini demo at one of our stand-ups. So we haven't really used it yet, but he made like an AI twin of himself.
I mean, that could be a useful recruitment tool. You could sort of say, listen,
exactly.
Meet Frederick. He can tell you that'll be a fun thing to try.
Yeah, because the idea was that it helps scale leadership. So it's nudging behavior, sharing strategic context, kind of
that's that was the use case.
Yeah, supporting real-time decisions, like kind of leadership on demand, if you will. So that was a kind of a fun way of us trying out AI, if you want to say so.
Yeah. I'm thinking about it because since I have so much data of myself, as in this podcast, I could definitely easily do. I think
you don't even have to be here anymore.
I'm going to try and do it in the summer. Actually, to create a sort of it's easy. I mean, I just have a GPT, and it could even be an avatar that sort of. It will since there's so much time of me talking.
Yes,
we definitely just have ask. So just give me some good insights into this at the moment, and that would be easier. And then that's better rather than just having in general. And also, I think since it knows so much about me, it'd probably be quite a good avatar. So
yes.
that was it. That's sort of my summer projects.
Exactly.
And then I can bring it. I don't know if it's a good thing. And then there will always be a CJ to come along with that. Anyway.
Exactly.
Cross the mind if you don't want to. Well, thank you very much for sharing so much. We have two final questions that I would like to touch upon. So, is there anything you sort of do to keep in touch and sort of stay on top of things? Would you listen, read, anything you'd like to share?
So, I listen to a few podcasts actually, like Talent Talks is one, Recruiting Future. Also one called Evolution, I think is quite good as well. So those, I usually try to listen to at least 2-3 podcasts.
So let's write this down. So Talent Talks.
Yes. Recruiting Future and Evolution is the other one that I've listened to most, I would say.
Cool. And what are they Swedish podcasts or?
I think some of them are from the UK, some Swedish. Yeah. I remember. Yeah, I think Talent Talks is actually maybe more from the UK actually.
Yeah.
But I mix it up a little bit. I mean, sometimes if I see an interesting topic, I'll listen to it.
And do you have any tips for anybody, a guest on the pod?
Oh, good question. I thought about this. So actually, I don't know if it's biased to say my brother-in-law.
Not at all. Nepotism. We welcome nepotism in this podcast.
Exactly. That's good. But I think, so Andreas Olenius, so he's a co-founder of Amuse, so actually the world's first mobile record label. He's also a former commercial director at Universal Music, and he's currently CEO at Tracklib, actually.
Oh, this is a great.
Yes. So Tracklib is actually one of the first, or I think is the first beat making app with a built-in catalog of sample ready songs. So he comes from a really interesting background, kind of intersection of tech, creativity, music on a global scale.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot happening in that space. That's very interesting. Yeah.
And also working both at a big company like Universal, but then also smaller startups as well.
Yeah,
and even building, being part of the founding group of starting a record label himself.
I think that's a very good tip. We'll make Andreas, you're on the list.
Yes.
We tend to want 2 recommendations, but the one from you, Carima, might count as, since he's your brother-in-law, you can push him up the push him up the
that's good.
the priorities list.
That's good.
Stort tack Carima, tack för att du var med, och då vill jag med det också puffa för nästa veckas avsnitt. Då är Emil Stighäll, en annan poddare, attraherad Rekrytera-podden, som jag själv var med en gång, och nu kommer Emil till oss, så det blir kul att höra allt vad Emil har att säga.